Order until a couple more senators show up to meet the quorum rules. So, but we will go ahead and get started as we have a lot on our agenda today. And I appreciate the Met Council coming back again and being ready to present their information. And looks like the first thing up is a briefing on the employee contract update. And Wes Koistra? Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Botched your name. Go ahead and state your name for the record, please, and you can proceed.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Wes Koistra. I'm the Deputy Regional Administrator at the Metropolitan Council. I've been asked to give a labor update in terms of our negotiation status. I'm going to provide, in the beginning, a little bit of context about our labor environment at the Council, give you some history about where negotiations have put us, some of the challenges that we have, and I'm hoping that addresses the request of the chair. First, I want to put this in the context of organizational structure. We have a little over 3,700 FTEs in total in the Metropolitan Council. By far, most of those FTEs are in Metro Transit, part of the organization that provides the bus service and rail service throughout the metropolitan area. I believe Metropolitan Transit provides well over 90% of the bus service, with the remaining provided by contract services, other provided by suburban transit providers. So it would not be a surprise that most of our full-time equivalents are directed towards the operation of those services. I've broken down bus from rail. We have about 2,400 bus FTEs, a little over 300 rail FTEs. The next largest division in the Metropolitan Council is environmental services, which provides the wastewater services throughout the 7-county area. There are currently about 676 FTEs in environmental services. Regional administration is the next largest division. Regional administration provides all of the administrative support services for all other divisions. That includes overall administration, but it also includes such things as finance, payroll, human resources, communications, information services, technology, risk management, contracts and procurement, all those sorts of infrastructure services that are provided. We have centralized those almost entirely over time, and that's what regional administration represents with 243 FTEs. Community development provides the HRA services throughout the city, and also provides the Livable Communities program, and is currently very much involved in the development of the Thrive 2040 agenda. What's method in Metropolitan Transportation Services with 38 FTEs is the planning, the MPO for this region, and they do the transit planning. They also oversee the metro mobility and contracted bus services. So that's just a very general idea of what these areas do, and they have 38 FTEs. This gives you a little sense of what's happened over time. It shows the change. This is not in your packet. I apologize. I think the packet was, I added a couple of slides. Oh, it is in your packet. Good. It was updated. This shows full-time equivalents over time, over the past decade. And so in 2012, we have approximately 80 FTEs less than we did 10 years ago. I think that during that time, transit, if you look at transit as a total of rail and bus FTEs, we have held transit FTEs fairly flat. It is maybe slightly less than flat, showing there some small reduction. But during that time, we've added Hiawatha service, North Star service. We've added bus rapid transit services. These FTEs include the Central Corridor Project Office. Also during this decade, overall ridership is up 22%. Bus ridership itself is up about 7%, and bus FTEs are down over 12%, while their ridership is up that 7%. So we feel like we're gaining efficiencies in the services that we're providing, and we're doing more with less, and I think that that's the direction we want to continue down. If you look at the environmental services, which is the light-colored section, you'll see slight declines there. During this period, hookups, residential equivalent hookups, are up 17%, and while staff numbers have been held relatively flat. The real story in environmental services in terms of total FTEs has happened over the last 2 decades, and I have a very quick slide after this to show you that. If you look at regional administration, there is a slight increase there, but I should footnote on that the increases to regional administration are really driven entirely by the centralization of those administrative services I referred to earlier. We have moved FTEs from around the organization to become more efficient in providing those services, so it really doesn't represent a net increase. It just represents FTE transfers from one area to another. You see a reduction in FTEs for community development, which is the light blue, and then a slight reduction for Metropolitan Transportation Services as well. I mentioned that the environmental services FTE reduction is really a longer story. Environmental services, I believe, came to the to become part of Metropolitan Council in 1994. You'll see that in 1993 there was almost 1,200 staff in environmental services. That was reduced drastically between 1993 and 2003, and we are almost working now at half the staff that we were working at in 1993. I think if I can do this in my head, it probably represents about maybe 55% of the staff, I'm guessing, from the difference.
Excuse me, Mr. Koistra, we're going to go ahead and jump in here and just call the meeting officially to order now that we have a quorum. So we'll call the meeting to order for the Legislative Commission on Metropolitan Governance. And we have minutes from September 25th. Do I hear someone want to move those minutes?
Move.
Thank you. The minutes have been moved. Any discussion or changes to the minutes? If not, all those in support of moving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same. Minutes are approved. And proceed. Thank you.
With respect to the labor structure, our labor structure is fairly complicated for the size of our organization, and it reflects a history of our organization as a result of a number of mergers. We were created in 1967. The council was created in 1967. Environmental services, the wastewater services were added in 1994. Metro Transit was added in 1994 as well. We have some labor units that are unique to Metropolitan Transit and Environmental Services. We have other labor units that cross divisional boundaries, but in total, we have 12 units of labor, of formal labor represented units, and we have 1 non-represented unit. So we have 13 units of labor in our council, and there really is an artifact of the history of each one of those organizations as they have come into a consolidated organization of the Metropolitan Council.
And who is the non-represented group?
The non-represented group is just simply those that are not working under a labor contract.
But no specific areas?
No, those staff that have no formal labor representation.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a little bit more information on that. Again, just like Transit Services represents the majority of our employees, the Amalgamated Transit Union is our largest union. It has 2,200, represents 2,200 of our little over 3,700 employees. The next largest is quite smaller than ATU, and that's AFSCME. I believe in the state, AFSCME dominates the labor contracts, but in our organization, our labor contracts are dominated by ATU membership. But AFSCME is nevertheless significant as well, and that has 461 members. Our non-represented, the group that does not have is not under any labor contract, is next in size at about a little over 300. The Transit Managers and Supervisors Association is at 228, and you see Local 35 there, and I don't need to read the numbers to you, but that gives you an idea of the size. If you go to the next slide, it just continues down all the labor units, and it goes to as small as the painters, and we have 6 painters that we employ inside our organization. So that's the entirety of our labor structure. Gives you a sense of size, scope, and comparison. And so moving to our negotiation status, our 2012 priorities are to have wages aligned with the local market, to have performance, create a structure where there can be performance-based movement through ranges. We want to improve wage consistency across labor units. As I mentioned before, we have labor units that are specific to environmental services, labor units that are specific to Metropolitan Transit. They may be representing the same kind of individual. For example, we have management staff are represented in ES by a different labor unit than what are represented by in Met Transit. That means they work under different contracts. You could have essentially the same or a similar position, and the contract structure is different, the wage structure is different, and we would like to bring more standardization around those wages and create a little simpler structure so we could have movement of people across our organization without having to consider what's this contract say, how is it different for me? And so we're trying to move incrementally towards some simplification and standardization.
Excuse me 1 minute. Representative Biskins has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do appreciate the understanding of the labor force at the Metropolitan Council, and now we're moving into the negotiation priorities. But before we leave the labor force, I do have a couple of questions. First off, what percent of your labor force would you consider management versus non-management?
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, I don't have that number in front of me, but I'm going to refer back to the previous slides. And certainly TMSA that has 228 people, includes managers and supervisors. MANA is a management, but that doesn't capture all of them there because non-rep has a mixture of professional staff and management staff. So I can get back to you on that, but I don't have the specific breakdown of non-rep right now. That's really what's missing.
If you could get that for us, that'd be great.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Biskins.
I was looking at the slide on page 3 of this packet and did just some quick additions, but I see it goes over on slide 4, so I'm probably off. But it's getting pretty close to 3,700. So my next question is, are all members of the Metropolitan Council workforce organized? Or are there some members of the Metropolitan Council workforce that live under the same rules as, what, about 83% of Minnesota who are at-will employees? Are there any at-will employees? And if so, what percent are at-will?
Mr. Coyce.
Madam Chair, the number of staff that are not organized of 3,700 are those that are show as non-represented in this chart, and that's 307.
Okay.
Now, there's a little bit of difference between what you refer to as at-will employees versus non-represented employees, at least as in my definition, whereas you can be non-represented but be a classified employee, and I think what you're asking about is the number of unclassified employees.
That's how you want to term
Yeah.
it.
And I can
People
get
who
that.
can give,
I don't have that
Madam
breakdown.
Chair, what I'm looking at is just simply people who you can give a 2-week notice of layoff for failure to perform, or you have to go through a series of hoops and bells and whistles.
Yeah, I can give you the break. Again, I didn't come with that level of detail, but I can get you the breakdown of those that are not represented, those that are classified, and those that are unclassified.
All right, Representative Iskins.
Yeah, one final question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you know how many members of the Metropolitan Council workforce actually opt for fair share?
Mr. Koistra.
Madam Chair, Representative, I don't know the exact number. I've been given a signal from the crowd that it's very, very small.
Representative Iskins.
Is that statistically zero?
Mr.
We'll find
Koistra.
out.
Thank
It's
you.
not statistically zero, but it's not a large group.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Koistra, go ahead.
As I was moving through priorities, I believe I was at the healthcare priorities. We want for healthcare to move toward greater cost-sharing health plan options. Also, have greater standardization and consistency across labor units. We have a significant challenge in healthcare, I believe, at our organization. We offer really 3 different levels of healthcare plans. And one of those levels has 2 different versions of it. And again, this is a history of labor contracts over time. It's a history of the organization over time. We have countless numbers of different rates in terms of employer share. And of course, just like on the wage side, we want to establish a more sensible, rational policy in the organization that looks at what should the employee-employer relationship be in the healthcare area. Just like other organizations, we're looking at movement away from the lower deductible, lower cost-sharing plans to higher cost-sharing plans. But I will say that the Metropolitan Council is probably behind others on this account, and we understand that. We're trying to work towards making those changes. So we want to move away from the higher cost plans, and we want to bring greater standardization and consistency across labor units in terms of how we cost share those plans and how those plans are designed. And later on, I'll talk a little bit about progress that we have made towards that account. We will be in 2012. We are negotiating 9, or we'll have negotiated 9 of those 12 labor contracts. ATU its current term expired in July of 2012, so we are that contract is expired, and we are negotiating at this time. We have settled AFSCME, we have settled TMSA. I'll give you some more information about that later on. Local 35 is in process. MANA we have settled, but are for 2012 during this year, because their contract expired, and we're already starting to again negotiate with MANA for 2013. Teamsters is in process. LELS 192, which is one of the police unions, is in process. We've settled 203, and we've settled the painters. This next chart provides a wage history, and where you see, I guess I'll call it light blue, sky blue highlights, those are the contracts that we've settled in 2012. This shows the wage history since 2009, and what the general column says for each year, that's a general wage adjustment that is across the board that all employees would qualify for. The all other would include any other change to the contract that would have a price implication over the previous year. This includes everything. It doesn't mean that if a movement through a range or a movement toward the midpoint was established in an historical contract that we didn't change how that movement was made, we didn't call that zero. We show you the cost of that movement in the next year over the previous year's contract. So this should be a fairly conservative representation of what the cost of one year is over the cost of the prior year in terms of wages. I say that specifically because sometimes when you talk about the new costs of a contract and there's steps embedded into a contract, they don't count the steps that are achieved in the following year as a contract cost because it was always part of the historical contract. We're counting that here. So this is everything that is wage related. I think that if you look over time, I did a quick calculation, and over this period of time, the average wage increase for those years that are settled is probably somewhere under 1.5%. It does range from under per year. It does range. Again, this is all increases. It does range from under 1% for the non-represented group to about an average of about 2.5% for one of those was a trade that where our wages are tied to the trade wages. Another one that was at the higher end was a unit that had that there was significant inequities within the organization and outside the organization in terms of wages and market wages. But for the most part, the average increase over this period of time for all factors, year over year, is I would guess it's somewhere around 1.3%, between 1.3 and 1.5%.
Representative Holbrook.
Madam Chair, if I might, for clarification, so if you were to take that graph in the 2013 and in the case of the ASME and the TMSA, the 2% would be just on the general wage, and then the 2.5 would be on top of that in total cost spread across the contract, but in some instances it may be more depending on where you are on the grid or less. Is that correct?
Mr. Koistra.
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, that is correct. The general increase applies to everybody, and the 2.5% is an average over everybody. And you are also correct that the 2.5% is applied differentially across individuals. Probably most of that 2.5% is represented by performance-based increases. There are some step increases there, but the majority of people are not eligible for step increases. The majority of our staff in the ASME, for example, would be eligible for performance-based increases, and that would be a range of increase based upon the results of the performance evaluation that occurs for that year.
Representative Holbrook.
If I might, so what's the largest percentage of increase you can get for a performance enhancer?
Mr. Koistra.
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, the contract states that for those that are in the performance range, those that would be receiving performance-based increases only, the lowest we could provide someone who meets expectations is 0.5%. The highest we could provide someone who is rated as the exceptional staff is 4%. And I'm giving you the ASME contract language in that case, and that's fairly representative.
Okay, so
Representative Holbrook.
if I might then, could you, so we could conceivably have somebody that would get a 6% increase, is that correct?
Madam Chair, Representative
I'm sorry,
Holberg,
go ahead.
under the contract language, that is correct. We still have discretion as management to fit our policy within that range.
Representative Holberg?
And, Madam Chair, are you budgeting for an average of 2.5% across the board in that other category? In other words, you're thinking that's kind of your average?
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, that's correct.
And if I might,
Representative Holberg?
can you tell me what kind of the dollar amounts to the organization this, if you know if there were no increases negotiated in any of the contracts, what is your inflator just because of steps, lanes, and bonuses already in the existing contracts?
Mr. Questra?
In other words, these zeros along the way, employees made step changes or received other things. So absent any increase in the contract, what were your labor costs going to increase?
Mr. Questra?
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, I'm not sure I'm understanding, but let me try. Where you see zeros on this chart, there were no step increases. There were zeros. That means that the staff made the same amount in, for example, if you take ASME, in 2011, there were no wage increases, steps, equity adjustments, general adjustments, otherwise provided in 2011 over 2010. So I want to make sure that's clear. That's why I was saying that there isn't this sort of embedded step increase that we don't talk about.
Madam Chair.
Representative Biskins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to follow up on that statement, so an employee who is actually working on year 2010, year 2011, you're saying because it's zero, did not actually move on the salary schedule? They stayed in the same cell, or did they move to a new cell?
Mr. Questra?
Madam Chair, Representative, that's correct. They did not move in the salary schedule.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And that's why, Madam Chair, that's why I emphasize that a lot of times this information is represented a little differently. We're trying to give you the whole story here. This is year-over-year increases, all elements.
Okay. Representative Holberg?
Madam Chair, can you maybe tell us, you're in the process of preparing a budget to set, I'm guessing the council set their maximum levy and now will fine-tune before they certify a levy in December. How much money has Met Council built into their budget projections for salary increases across the system?
Mr. Questra?
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, I don't have it in front of me, but I do believe that's going to be part of a presentation later this morning on the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Mr. Questra? Oh, Senator Lilly.
Madam Chair, how many of the employees are at the performance grade? How many are still in the steps? And how many have completed or at the maximum level?
Mr. Questra?
Madam Chair, I know that the majority of the employees are at the performance grade. Our employees are, I believe our average age of our employees is about 50, 49 or 50. I don't think that's much different than the state. So we have a lot of long-term employees. In fact, I think it's worth this commission knowing that we're expecting over the next 5 years up to over 200 employees retiring per year. So we're going to lose through retirement, getting close to 30% of our employees. So if you think about the age of our employees and how how near retirement they are, and the fact that where steps are provided, they're only provided at the low end of the range, you would then understand that probably most of the employees are not eligible for steps and are only eligible for performance-based increases. And we have that information. I can give you the exact figure, but I want to kind of give you a sense of it.
And Madam Chair, so we have been discussing wages. Could you also address benefits and what else is in the package, and how that impacts the budgeting that the Met Council is doing, and how this impacts your overall costs.
Mr. Koister.
Madam Chair, I'll move on to my other slides then. Here's some other changes that have occurred in addition to the wage increase. We have developed a common wage structure. I mentioned before the wage structures were very different from contract to contract for staff doing the same work. And we've developed a common wage structure that applies to AFSCME, TMSA, and the non-rep units. We have eliminated the high-cost health plan for AFSCME, TMSA, machinists, LELS, and the non-rep unit. I mentioned we had the high-cost plan. We had what we call distinctions, which is a fairly similar structure to the state plan, and then we have an HRA that we offer our members. And our goal is been very publicly stated, is to get out of the high-cost plan. We don't think it's good for employees. We don't think it's good for us. We're all paying for it. They're paying for it. And we don't believe it brings the best value to the healthcare, just to the healthcare dollar. Just to give you an example, we had an actuary look at this, and I'm saying this to you because we're serious about these changes. And we were spending 30% more for 5% more benefit. And that creates difficulty not just for the employer, it creates difficulty for the employee. But the process of moving away from that is like the process of moving away from any health care program, where people are used to their provider, they're used to how it's structured. Health care plans are complex, and we've made some great movement. And again, we've made movement into such that we've eliminated that program for many of our employees. And one of our approaches to this has been, if you want to keep this program, you can pay for it, but we're not paying any more for it. And that's how we've kind of managed out of this structure. But that's the financial incentive we're providing. But at the same time, we've had really good discussions with our employees about the healthcare market, about plan designs that work, and about how plan designs impact consumer behavior in the healthcare market, and they are engaged in that very, very much so. And we have a new opportunity here that we're excited about. We're transitioning to self-insurance in 2013. We're getting savings off of the elimination of the high-cost health plan. We're also getting savings in our transition to the self-insurance, which offsets some of the wage increases that you saw in 2013. And this movement to self-insurance is exciting on a couple of fronts. It's certainly exciting because it saves significant dollars to us. It's also exciting because we will have much more transparent information about our claims and our claims history and our claims patterns. We can see what's driving our costs. We can share that with employees. We can talk intelligently about plan design changes that will benefit everybody, whereas when you're buying a fully insured product, it tends to be a black box. You're always talking in theory about what's driving costs and what's driving claims. Now we own it. Now we own it jointly with our employees. They want to bring a group together that meets on this regularly and looks at our claims. That kind of information sharing, we believe, only can lead to better plan design and more value for both the employee and employer health care dollar. So we're excited about it.
Good. Representative Biscuits has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I look at some of the settlements that have already occurred and then think about an economy that's growing at less than 2%, it does beg the question as to who is negotiating on behalf of management, who is negotiating on behalf of the taxpayers. So I do have a couple of questions. Your negotiating teams, is it one team that negotiates with each of these labor unions, or do you have a different negotiating team representing management for each of these contracts?
Mr. Koister.
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, we have a labor unit that that does the negotiation. They do so at the direction of the council. We meet with the council. We talk about parameters. That's done in closed session. That's not public information like it wouldn't be in any other organization. We talk about those parameters. With respect to the what you reference as increases in tough times, I want to go back and just show a little bit that I mentioned earlier that our average increase over 4 or 5 years, depending on what's been negotiated, over everything. We're not hiding steps. We're not hiding anything in that average increase. Is probably around 1 1/3%. At the same time, as I mentioned, we're able this year to lower our health care costs, to reduce our health care costs, and certainly reduce the trend. In fact, we think we have a structure now that will allow us to flatten our health care costs over the next 3 or 4 years. So between 2012 and 2015, we think they'll be flat. That's unique. I've also showed you that we are reducing. We are getting more from each one of our staff. I think that the number of rides per staff in transit has gone up about 23% over the last decade. I think the number of residential hookups, if I recall, per staff in ES has gone up by about 17%. The issue of managing staff and managing staff costs is certainly a contract issue that we take seriously, but it's also there's also a lot of other management elements when you talk about how do we get the most productivity out of the resources that we have, and we're trying to address that on all fronts. So I think over time, our wage history and our wage policy is defensible and comparable, and maybe even better than comparable to a lot of other government units. And we've certainly taken that on in terms of holding down wages. We've also taken that on with respect to keeping full-time equivalents down, adding Hiawatha, North Star, Central Corridor without adding staff, adding bus services without adding staff. So, I really appreciate your comment there. We take it very, very seriously, the issue of staff costs and productivity. But we also are facing over 1,000 employees retiring in the next 5 years, and we have to be able to offer a reasonable wage. You expect us to provide a good service. We do that through our good staff, and it's a balance all the time. It's a balance.
Representative Biskins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back to my question. Is it the same negotiating team that negotiates each of these contracts, or is there a different team negotiating each contract separately?
Mr. Koister?
Madam Chair, Representative, I'm sorry for not answering that question.
Okay. I got your goat, I think.
You got my passion.
Yeah.
We have a labor unit, and the management team, because labor units differ across the council. If it's an ATU unit, for example, we have our labor negotiation staff working with our general manager of transit. If it's MANA, transit would not be involved in that. That would be working with our general manager of the other areas, because MANA crosses those other areas. So I guess the answer to the question is, yeah, there are different negotiating teams, but they're all working within the same parameters. We're all looking at, we've constructed priorities across the agency because we're trying to get consistency across the agency, but there are nuances in these contracts. So those are managed generally by work with the general manager.
Representative Biskins?
Yeah, one final question to this issue. Thank you, Madam Chair. Are the majority of the negotiators representing management, i.e. the taxpayers, are they members of organized labor unions themselves?
Mr. Koister?
Madam Chair, Representative, no.
Thank you.
I do have a question, and it concerns overtime. And how does that fit into, what you're... Is that figured into your budgeting? And I know, Mr. Shetland told me that they couldn't get someone here today to answer some of the questions that have been in the news lately about the police and the overtime issues there. And so, I understand, you have fewer employees, but is that causing more of an overtime issue in a general sense? And what can be, is there any scheduling matters that need to be addressed so that there's less overtime? Or is it just a matter of you don't have enough staff, or what? If you could address that a little bit.
Madam Chair, that's a really good question, because you can cut staff to the point where you're paying too much in areas like overtime. But there's also the inverse can be true, where sometimes overtime is more efficient than adding staff. And I know that on the transit area, I'm not speaking specifically to the police here, but I'm speaking to the operators, that they have software tools that allow them to make that analysis. At what point is it better to add staff versus pay overtime? And they do that analysis all the time, and they manage that fairly tightly. I don't want to represent the overtime issues that came up in the transit police report that I think is going to come before you at another time. But I think that I don't have an overtime figure for you, but those are the kinds of decisions we make. Is it right to pay overtime? Is that cheaper in the long run? Is this a temporary bump in workload? Is it a long-term change? What's the cost of adding staff versus paying overtime? Those are questions we ask. And like any other organization, we don't do it perfectly. So I'm sure that we'll find places, and we always find places where overtime is being provided, where it might be more efficient to do something differently. Sometimes overtime is a function of not being able to hire out of the workforce. Example of that is information services and technology. It's one of those fields where when the economy is down, there are it's very easy to hire IT folks. When the economy is building back, and that's what we're seeing today, it's very difficult to hire IT folks. Their market really fluctuates with the economy and the business pattern and the growth in business. And so I know in the IT area, we've been struggling hiring the staff that we need to do the job, and that probably results in overtime and other staff.
Just to follow up on that, I guess when we ask the police folks to come in, I'd also like to see, it seems like in the articles that I've read, some of the overtime has been paid because of Twins games or those sorts of things, which to me, those things are coming, can you schedule accordingly? And so I'd like to see if there's any correlation between overtime paid for those sorts of events with the transit police and with other transit staff. Is there also overtime there? Are they getting the scheduling down better than the transit police? So if we could see a comparison there, that would be helpful, I think. But go ahead and proceed, or were you wrapping up there?
Madam Chair, that's the end of my slide.
Okay. I'm sorry, Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know you've been fielding some questions from the right, so I thought I would offer one from my perspective. I knew I'd get a rise out of you. But are any of these services, union jobs or others, has the Met Council over these years been privatizing any of these functions or services or employees that are normally done by union labor?
Representative Hornstein, that's a question from the left?
Privatizing? It could be.
Okay, very good. All right, Mr. Coyster.
You haven't heard my follow-up.
Oh, okay.
Madam Chair, can I hear the follow-up?
Mr. Hoyster.
We do have some contracted bus service. I should probably be better prepared to answer that question. We do, for example, contract for IT project management staff, because often those are for one-time projects. We do contract. We have fairly significant contract budget for IT. Also, IT has some. There's some fairly specific expertise required under different software that would not make sense to build inside the organization if we look outside the organization. Metro Mobility, we contract outside. dial right. I'm being helped here.
Yeah,
I'm being
right.
prompted here. Maybe.
Sorry. We do some Maple Grove Transit service. They work with us. They contract with the council. That's
Representative
Well,
Bernstein.
thank you, and I'm glad that it's limited because, I mean, I would urge you to, and I know there may be some pressures on the council in that direction, and I would urge you to be very cautious. You know, we took a look at some of the privatization going on in contract services with MnDOT versus the existing labor force, and it ended up that a lot of those services were more expensive. And that's why we passed that Taxpayer Accountability Act as it related to transportation and at MnDOT. So I urge caution on that. And I think you've laid out, you know, something here that I'm pleased with, that I think we're getting good value for taxpayers, and I think you're doing well by union workers as well. And it's a balance. No one gets what they want 100%. I think you mentioned that, Mr. Koistra. So in these jobs, members, when I was on the Met Council, they allowed me to drive a bus. It was in the parking lot, though. And my family still remembers that. I'm kind of amazed they didn't go through the window. It's a very difficult job. And then the AFSCME workforce, as I recall or understand it, a lot is in the wastewater area. And, you know, we had a chance to tour the Seneca facility in Egan, and, you know, again, these aren't easy jobs as well. And I think, you know, we want to do our best to attract a really good quality workforce for at least those two areas, as well as some of your other functions. And so I'm pleased with what I've heard today, and I think, you know, again, taxpayers, and you're doing well by taxpayers and by workers, and, you know, these are challenging times, but I think, you know, hopefully we'll be able to replace those several hundred workers that are retiring and continue to have good quality employees. So thank you, Madam Chair. It's helpful to do this. I think I've been on this commission now since, you know, my freshman year in 2002, and I don't think we've ever had a conversation this in-depth concerning the labor force. So I think it's helpful. It's a part of our job as overseeing the budget, but I'm really pleased with what I've heard today.
Thank you, Mr. Koistra. I appreciate your time.
Thank
you so much. Next up, we're going to have some updates on corridor projects. Mark Furman is here to do that. You know the drill. Go ahead and state your name for the record and your position.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and committee members. I am Mark Furman, the Deputy General Manager for Metro Transit for Metropolitan Council. We had a pair of updates, and we thought we would start with Central Corridor. That was a topic of some discussion at your prior meeting on September 25th. So I'd like to give you a quick overview on where we are at on construction on the biggest public works project ever to come to Minnesota, and then respond to some of those concerns that we heard last time from some of those businesses along University Avenue. The project is about 11 miles long. It's 18 new stations to add to the 19 over on the Hiawatha line. 47 new light rail vehicles, of which the first one we introduced to the public just 2 days ago at Target Field Station. And our forecast is for almost 41,000 weekday rides. This will be the busiest transit line in Minnesota by far once it's fully operational. We're pleased to report that we are at 74% construction complete. Our target this fall was to hit 75%, but we will achieve that and exceed that a little bit before the snow flies. A couple illustrations of how we're doing. Right on the northeast side of the Capitol building, here looking west on University Avenue from the Cedar Street Bridge. You can see on the left half of this slide the future track guideway section where we'll have the two rail tracks. And then on the right half of the slide will be the reconstructed University Avenue connecting with Robert Street behind the picture taker and Martin Luther King Boulevard, Bryce Street to the west. Robert Street Station there on the east part of the Capitol campus there with the Freeman building in the background, Stassen building on the other side of this platform, right in the heart of the state office complex. And then on the west side of the Capitol campus we have the Capitol Rice Street Station that's now well along and coming out of the ground here. Also wanted to give you a pictorial above the ground of the before and after of University Avenue. While it doesn't look dramatically different in the before and after here, the project is reconstructing University Avenue from building face to building face. That's 120 feet. So it's not just the two rail tracks in the middle, but it's reconstructing the two vehicle lanes in each direction. It's reconstructing the sidewalks, which you can see here at the corner of Lexington and University Avenue. But what you don't see is probably even more important, the public utilities. The water and storm sewer utilities underneath University Avenue date back 90 to over 100 years. They had not been touched since early 20th century. Those have all been reconstructed and replaced with updated utilities to serve all of these small businesses along
Sir Furman,
University Avenue.
thank you. If I could put you on hold a second. Representative Holberg has a
Thank
question.
you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Furman, what was the resolution on the tunnel issue north of the Capitol? I'm not sure I ever heard what the final resolution. Are we moving a tunnel? Will we still have a tunnel? Who paid for it?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, just to get you up to speed, that there's the existing tunnel, and then through the 2012 bonding bill, there was just a little over $6 million that was programmed as part of the State Capitol Complex improvements for a new tunnel. That would be a secure tunnel for pedestrian and access to the State Capitol building, as well as a service and maintenance tunnel. The State Department of Administration was poised, once the legislature acted at the end of session, to award a contract with those newly authorized dollars. That happened, and the contractor came in and did their work very efficiently from essentially July through September underneath University Avenue. The work still continues on both the north and south sides of University Avenue, but what we had done at the project was closely coordinate with the state and its contractor, get the University Avenue portion of the tunnel done first, and then on September 17th, the state essentially handed back to the project University Avenue in that section so that we can continue and finish up our construction here before end of November. So both projects are proceeding well and on schedule.
And
Representative Holberg.
Madam Chair, Mr. Furman, was the tunnel relocated, or will it still hook up to the little doorway on the north side that...
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, the new tunnel, I assume you're asking, did not require relocation. It is now constructed in that area, what I will say immediately to the northwest of the north steps to the Capitol building.
Right, thank you.
Continue with your presentation.
And finally, on this illustration, Madam Chair, I just wanted to point out all those public utilities have been now replaced by the project without any special assessment to all those local business owners. The project has created jobs, and so here's the illustration where in essentially the space of the length of 2 football fields, we have 48 workers pouring some of the new embedded track in the middle of University Avenue. And from a global perspective, over 4,000 construction workers have now worked this project. And they're not just from Minneapolis and St. Paul, they're from all over. In fact, about half of the counties in the state of Minnesota are home to a Central Corridor construction worker. That equates to a payroll that we have on this project of about $250 million. And those payroll dollars are going back to Main Street throughout the state of Minnesota.
I have a question. How many of the workers that were hired, what percentage of them were from out of the state of Minnesota?
Madam Chair, when we plotted this based on the active payrolls from July of this year, it appeared that there's a majority of them from the 7-county area, over 50%. But I was somewhat surprised to see the wide geographic coverage area of those construction workers from far beyond the 7-county metro. But we can give you those specific proportions with quantifiable detail.
Okay. And you understood not out state, out of state? And data, okay.
Outside of the state of Minnesota.
Correct.
Yeah, we'll provide that.
Okay, thank you.
We do see some western Wisconsin folks coming in.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So that's the update on project status, and then I wanted to spend the rest of our presentation just updating you on where we're at and being good community participants and good community listeners for those folks. Well, we were approved to start our engineering on the Central Corridor project at the end of 2006, so we've been at this for a while. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that former Met Council Chair Peter Bell, current Met Council Chair Susan Haig, have both made it a very strong commitment to go into the community, meet with the community members on their turf and on their terms. And so whether that was early meetings to talk about design shown here by Chair Bell, or even just a month ago where Chair Haig has been out meeting with some of the business owners. Here is Ann of Ann's Hair Salon on Eastern University Avenue. Some of the concerns we heard early on in the design was that the station spacing was too long between stations on the eastern end of University Avenue, a mile or slightly more. Where if you're on the Minneapolis side, station spacing was much closer, more like a half a mile. So through many discussions at the community level, what was agreed to was to add 3 stations at Hamlin, at Victoria, and at Western Avenues. And so the project now has 18 stations, generally spaced about half a mile apart from downtown to downtown. Those new stations will benefit those businesses. We heard last time about the concern about the loss of on-street parking. And yes, it is true that when we first started our design, there was forecasted loss of about 300 or so on-street parking spaces along University Avenue. But through the design development process, listening to community concerns and business concerns, we took 3 actions at their urging. I mentioned the addition of the 3 stations. They wanted additional and extended turn lanes to provide vehicular access for their customers to turn off of University Avenue to get close to their businesses. And we also heard from neighborhood groups who wanted to have additional pedestrian crossings from the north side to the south side across the light rail tracks. All 3 of those actions, incorporated now into the project design and now construction, did take away additional parking spaces, about 500 additional parking spaces. So we sought to find the balance between providing good access, but also providing the parking. And so through that process, we engaged with the City of St. Paul and the local businesses at 11 workshops, and the City of St. Paul created a parking grant program, which ultimately generated about 24 parking grants. And here's an example of one just off of Cleveland and University, where a subway had a dozen parking spaces along University Avenue before construction. Those went away. And so they were successful in getting a parking grant where they were able to essentially double their off-street parking, and here is that now in place before construction began.
Were there a limited number of grants available? There had to be, there's limited space, so I'm just...
Oh, Madam Chair, the city was able to identify about $1.25 million for this, and that resulted in 24 grants. There was more demand than supply, as always, but for those areas that lost the most on-street parking, the city was able to respond to those needs. We also provided for businesses up and down the avenue that it's not just about on-street parking. There is adequate supply of off-street public parking, as well as cross-street on-street parking. And so we developed these maps with City of St. Paul to show each business node along the avenue that there is on-street parking, and while it requires some change behavior on the part of customers and suppliers, they are able then to still access these businesses to deliver goods or to consume goods from these businesses. We also, after last year, 2011 construction season, during the lull in construction last winter, we took a step back and looked at ourselves in a mirror. And our staff at the project office we met with our contractors, our big civil contractors, both Walsh Construction on the east side in St. Paul and Ames McCrossan Construction on the west side in Minneapolis, and asked ourselves what went well, but also what did not go so well, and how can we improve upon our performance here in 2012, which has been our peak construction year. So we had a number of meetings internally and identified a number of areas where we could do better. So I'd like to highlight those briefly. Many of those were touched upon at your last meeting by some of those local businesses. And we rolled out this same presentation, more detailed than I will share today, to all of our partners, local businesses, University of Minnesota, policymakers, and the Met Council as well. Last year, when we were constructing the rail line east-west on University Avenue, each time we crossed a north-south street, we did so with a partial closing. And that would allow still north-south traffic, single lane, to cross University Avenue. Well, to do that and maintain traffic on that north-south avenue, it would take 8 to 12 weeks to finish that intersection parcel by parcel. Much delay and much frustration on the part of the local businesses. So this year, in most cases, except for the really busy streets like Dale or Lexington, what we have done is close that north-south street, get the contractor in, get him out within 2 to 4 weeks. Detail where the detour is, and everybody knows what to expect. Streets closed for less than a month, and then get it reopened fully much more quickly. And that's really what the businesses wanted to see. We thought to parcel out the work zones in about 1 mile increments. And so as the project would progress from west to east on University Avenue, we would open up each of those segments on University, south side, north side, about 1 mile at a time.
Is that, excuse me?
Yes.
Is that normally, is that normal for a project like this? A mile, when you think of how many businesses are fit into a mile down along the central corridor, that's shutting down an awful lot of them all at one time, or at least putting a lot of them at risk for fewer customers. Is a mile long, is that the ordinary stretch that other projects comparable to this would close down at a time?
Madam Chair, that's a great question, because that's the same question we asked ourselves before we started the heavy construction in 2011. And so we asked ourselves the whole spectrum. We said, do we want to do half-mile segments, mile segments? Do we want to shut down one side of University Avenue from essentially the city line to the state capitol? And what we sought to do in evaluating that was weigh the disruption and access to those businesses with the efficiency of the contractor to complete that work within that construction season. And so the half-mile option was not efficient enough for the contractor to mobilize their crews and proceed through to get that 3-mile segment done last year and then again this year. We also looked at the full closure of 1/2 of University Avenue, and the businesses said, not going to work for us. It pretty much puts access to their front doors out of service for months and months at a time. So where we settled, to respond to your question, was a mile seemed reasonable for the contractor to achieve, and then it limited to about 3 to 4 months the limited access for a given business along University.
Okay.
So that was the plan going into 2011, and the execution of that plan was not so well on the St. Paul side of University Avenue. Our contractor, Walsh Construction, is an international construction company, very large, headquartered in Chicago. They had never had work here in Minnesota before for Minnesota DOT or for Metropolitan Council. As a result, their gear up in 2011 was too slow. The peak hiring bar on this graph should have been spring. It was end of summer. And so we were tracking this with the project office and making the contractor aware that their ramp up and mobilization was too slow. So they had a lot of catch up to do last year. They did successfully by the end of the season, but their mobilization with their own crews, their mobilization with their subcontractors was slow last spring.
And so were they getting these bonuses during that time?
Madam Chair, there were construction bonuses that we talked about at the last meeting that are programmed in the project budget through beginning in spring of 2011 through 2012 into the first part of next year. And with each quarter, those local businesses who sat on that review committee would then evaluate the contractor's performance and make that recommendation.
And as we learned from that testimony, too, that some of those, the sheets that they filled out to determine whether the contractor would get these bonuses, some of those questionnaires were actually not even used in the final data that you compiled. So I feel like, probably that situation, needs to be made clearer to the people filling out the forms. The criteria need to be maybe a little bit broader, because from my understanding in talking to Mr. Danielson Casillas was that there wasn't room in there for enough comment from some of the businesses and from some of the citizens as well. There wasn't enough comment in there that was taken into consideration before making the decision to give this company their bonuses. So I think you can add that to the list of things that you need to change to make that a fair process, because obviously from the testimony that we heard, businesses did not feel like the contractor was communicating well with them, doing what they said they would do. They weren't giving them enough lead time when they were going to come in and shut off water or power or whatever the case may be. So that's something that I think really needs to be addressed, and I hope that you will do that in the future.
Madam Chair, appreciate those comments. During 2011, there was never any case where any of those business and citizen review sheets were disregarded. The example cited by Mr. Danielson Castillo that you referenced was an isolated incident for the spring of 2012 where his comments pertain to St. Paul Water Services rather than Welch contract performance.
Well, he's not here to clarify that, but
Yep.
go ahead.
We had much discussion with Mr. Castillo, Mr. Danielson Castillo on that point.
Senator Thompson, did you have a question?
I did, thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted to go back to something you talked about earlier. If I understood you correctly, you indicated that one business lost 100 on-street parking places, and you made an accommodation by allowing them to double their parking in another location. Is that right?
Mr. Berman, sorry.
Yep, Mr. Chair and Senator Thompson, I was referencing the Subway example, a Subway sandwich shop there just west of Cleveland, and I said they lost a number of on-street parking spaces. The quantification of that, based on my patronizing that Subway shop regularly, is probably 12 to 15 on the north side of University Avenue. And then the parking grant allowed them to add about 20 spaces off-street next to their shop.
Okay, thank you.
After, Madam Chair, if I may continue, after we talked with Welch, our contractor, to mobilize more aggressively, we saw that here on University Avenue in August and the rest of the construction season. There are also some cases where contractor vehicles and subcontractor blocked access to businesses. So if somebody here last summer was hankering for a slice of German chocolate pie, they would have tough getting it at Perkins. And so we redoubled our efforts at the project office, hired some additional construction field inspectors to keep an extra eye on the street so that that would not recur. And there were actually instances where we penalized and fined the contractor for blocking access to businesses.
Mr. Furman, I also want to back up for a second.
Yes.
When you said that all this new infrastructure was put in, the pipes and the infrastructure and so forth underground, you stated that the businesses were not assessed for that, but we heard testimony last time contrary to that, that these businesses were being assessed, some of them up to $15,000 each, which, of course, they didn't have budgeted for, and when their revenues are already down, how are they supposed to come up with that money? So could you clarify and that, are you saying that absolutely none of those businesses were assessed for that, for new infrastructure?
Madam Chair, the Met Council is not involved in that business transaction, but let me explain to you how we understand it, where those businesses would, in places where they wanted the new water hookup, this is specifically in the case of the city water, that there was a hookup charge for new city water. But my understanding was that there was not a city-levied special assessment for the improvements up and down University Avenue. But if there's a specific new water hookup, whether it's on University Avenue or on Randolph Street, there is a city water charge.
Representative Scalzi, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question. We heard testimony at the last meeting regarding the construction vehicles being parked on the private parking lots, and I think, and I might have heard it wrong, but parking the construction workers were parking their private vehicles in some of these added parking spaces or existing parking spaces where there were businesses. And I'm just kind of curious, how did you handle that? And then would you tell us what you mean by penalized and fined? What does that mean? Like penalized how and fined how much?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Scalzi, there have been instances more so earlier this summer with the civil lease contractor Walsh, where their staff would come to the job site and they would park their personal or their contractor vehicles near the construction sites, but in the neighborhood. And that is not good for those local businesses when they open for lunch later that day or for the local neighborhood. So we were monitoring that, and we intensified our aggressive enforcement of that by Angie or others from our staff who actually went out there with cameras and took pictures of those vehicles that were parked there at 7 a.m. when they started their work with license plates, and then gave those to Walsh and said, here's warning number 1. And if that vehicle repeats that violation, then you, Walsh, need to take action. And in some cases that included termination of that staff person. The other part of your question was regarding the fines, where there would be blocking access to businesses in my previous slide. And so that would result where we would essentially fine the contractor $250 to $500 for a violation such as that.
Representative Scalzi, you have any follow-up on that? How much in fines did the construction company pay to date for those kind of violations?
Madam Chair, I haven't looked at that number in the recent past because there haven't been many violations, but back in August it was thousands of dollars.
All right, continue, please. Thank you.
One issue identified last year that was both an access issue and a safety issue. Because we had closed off one half for construction of University Avenue, we had to put buses not normally on their curbside, but really on the middle of the street with temporary bus stops. And this was an example of one of those last spring. Not a safe condition, and so we directed the contractor to create an accessible and a safe temporary bus stop for those 20-some thousand folks who ride the Route 16 each day. There were other issues as we rebuilt the street. We also, as I said, rebuilt the sidewalks, and so we needed to maintain pedestrian access which was always a challenge because that would change every day throughout the course of construction. And here, the contractor then constructed temporary pedestrian bridges to get to and from the hundreds of doors that front on University Avenue. Because of the always dynamic situation, the contractor didn't keep up with signage all the time. And so there were cases where there was confusing signage. And you can see examples of that here on the Avenue and downtown as well. And so with our inspectors out in the field again, that improved last year and has been much improved throughout this year. Also, as the sidewalks got replaced, those sidewalks would have to, concrete would be poured, have to cure, so that sidewalk's closed. And here are some examples where the contractor did not provide the proper temporary pedestrian access around a new sidewalk. In one case, in front of a bus stop. Another case, they had one of their vehicles parked over the temporary path where pedestrians are supposed to go. So with that, again, with more aggressive inspection and kind of pre-inspection where we would check and kind of do a dry run with pedestrians, or in this case, a wheelchair person down at the university, to make sure that those pathways were clear and that they were accessible.
Mr. Furman, I just had a question on how Walsh was chosen. I think that they were chosen before I was in the legislature, but it just seems like, had they built any project, light rail project before?
Madam Chair, the bidding process for federal and state law was a competitive, low bid process. We had 5 bidders for the Civil East project, and they were the responsible bidder for this work. They, as I mentioned, had not done work here in Minnesota, but they've done it all over the country, and their team that is building Central Corridor had just concluded building the Green Line LRT in Dallas, Texas. So yes, they had that experience. I would observe that the difference between the Dallas project and this project is the Dallas project was mostly paralleling roadways. It was not down the middle of a major urban arterial as we have here.
Yeah, because it just seems like they were, everything was an afterthought, it seems to me, in this, the problems were creeping up left and right, and every action they took was an afterthought, and it already, hurt businesses along the corridor. So I just was curious about how we came about getting Walsh Construction. Go ahead with your testimony, please.
And then, Madam Chair, I would like to invite my colleague Robin Kaufman from the project office. She's Assistant Director for Community Outreach and Public Involvement. She has been our frontline person with the businesses. And Robin, why don't I ask you to invite you to walk through this portion of the presentation.
Hi, welcome to the committee. Go ahead and state your name and your position for the record.
Thank you. Good morning, committee members and Madam Chair. My name is Robin Kaufman. I'm the Assistant Director for Administration, Communication, and Outreach for Central and Southwest LRT projects. As Mr. Furman indicated, I'm going to be providing an overview of our outreach efforts as they started from the design phase back in 2007 and then through the construction communication efforts going on today. One of the things that we started with was the hiring of a diverse outreach team. You can see the current staff here. Shua Lee is the outreach manager, not shown here. This team was selected because of their connections to the community as well as the language that they speak that reflects the needs of the community. Just an example of the multilingual languages they speak. With this staff, they speak Somali, Hmong, Spanish, Swahili, French, German, which hasn't been used, and then American Sign Language. They also do, as I mentioned, have connections to the corridor. One of the staff worked with the Cedar Riverside community, especially focusing on health issues, women's health issues with the Somali community on Cedar Riverside, so she was already familiar with the community, and she also served as Goldie Gopher, so she was familiar with the communications team over at the U of M. And then other members have either worked on University Avenue, owned a business on University Avenue, or lived or even grew up on University or in the area. Just to talk a little bit about their outreach, they did start with the design phase, so they did a lot of gathering of information and taking the plans out to the businesses and the community as we were in development. One of my favorite examples is on University Avenue, we were looking at the sidewalk width, and at one point we had proposed 8 feet for the sidewalk, and they were meeting with a local church whose main access from the sanctuary was off of University, and we were reviewing the plans with them, and the folks that they were meeting with indicated, they said, well, how are we going to be able to carry caskets for funeral services if we have to come out the door and the sidewalk is only 8 feet wide, because you can't carry a casket, the width is greater than 8 feet. And so as that, we worked with the city of St. Paul, and we're able to widen the sidewalk to 10 feet. And that's just a small example of the level of detail that this outreach team and the engineering team worked with. As we move into construction, they've been doing a variety of things, whether it's door-to-door. Here's an example of Nikongo going door-to-door to businesses, letting them know about upcoming work, talking about access plans, responding to questions or concerns they may have. This is a very intensive, literally door-to-door activity that they do on a daily basis. Some of the other communications that we do, this is a sample, just the header of our construction communication. We do have 3 construction updates that go out every Friday, one for downtown, one for University, and one for University Avenue in St. Paul, and one in Minneapolis. When these started, they were just simple text. We talked to some businesses, and they suggested, it would be really helpful if you added a map. So we added a map. Then someone said, you could liven it up a little bit with some photos. So we started putting some photos of construction. That lasted for about 2 weeks when businesses said, why are you showing construction vehicles and equipment, because that's actually scaring away our customers. So they suggested that we start using that as an opportunity to feature businesses. And so every week on the top of each of those construction updates, we feature a business or an activity or an event that may draw people into the corridor and to support those businesses. That's been actually very well received. Another thing we provide is signage. So there's just a variety of signage. Each contract had $100,000 built into the contract for additional signage. So you can see here things like business banners that say business is open, buy local. We use business access signs to direct people if roads are closed. And then we do have some 3 variable message boards that we use to just provide special messages. So if we're closing an intersection, we note the detour, or even just simple messages like support University Avenue businesses. And we've also used these for special events. So, for example, on Rondo Days, we had all 3 of them located out, directing people to the access and to parking for the Rondo Days parade. Another activity that started earlier this year, and this was based on some inquiries or requests from the business community, was to have a business marketing program. There was a small kind of grassroots program called Discover Central Corridor that was funded by the Central Corridor Funders Collaborative. And they said that was working, but they needed to do it on a bigger scale. So we did allocate $1.2 million towards a business marketing program, and that just started earlier this summer. You can see here some examples. We have, I believe it's 7 billboards that rotate. We also have 3 variable message signs, and then there's about 70 bus sides that are displaying these ads.
Excuse me, Ms. Kaufman. Representative Biskins has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is Mr. Furman. That $1.2 million number kind of rings a bell. Is that roughly the same as the amount of money that was set aside for grants to add additional off-street parking to businesses?
Mr.
Was that
Furman.
the same number you used?
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, you recall correctly, but they are 2 different streams of money. The parking grant was $1.25 million, and this is a separate $1.2 million to promote the local businesses.
Thank you.
Representative Biskin?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Furman, and, most people don't understand this different streams of money. It seems like just a different pocket it came out of. You did not, you're here to tell us you didn't have the flexibility of shifting some of this marketing money to actually fulfill the unmet needs and grants, you said, and I think I quote, there was much more demand than supply. Here was an opportunity to increase the supply. Were the businesses ever actually queried as to whether or not, we'll put your business up on a sign for 3 months, or we'll give you a grant to add permanent off-street parking? Were they ever asked which they would prefer to have?
Mr. Furman, was that flexibility an option?
Madam Chair and Representative Biskins, because of the multi-year process, we talked about the parking during the design phase so that any of that parking mitigation could be implemented before the heavy construction began last spring. So, no, there was never discussed at the business level that trade-off that we talked about in 2008 with the 2012 trade-off about additional promotion of local businesses. In the case of the Met Council being able to provide direct dollars to Business A or Business C, we are not statutorily authorized to do that. And so we worked with our project partner, City of St. Paul, who was able to provide those dollars through their funding sources. And then this business promo program, again, we partnered with the City of St. Paul.
Representative Biskins?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Furman. I do appreciate that. One final question, I guess, is just a little more specificity on this issue of much more demand than supply. How much more? Were you able to fund 75% of the requests, 50%, 20%? Where was your ability to fund on off-street parking, which I think was the central issue in putting this line down the middle of University? The central issue we knew before you even began from businesses is, where's our customers going to park? How much, what was the percent of requests made that you were able to fulfill with 1.2 million?
Mr. Furman?
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, let me respond with two parts. First off, the supply-demand point about the actual parking, where there was about 1,100 on-street parking spaces on University Avenue before construction. And we are taking about 85% of those. So there's a couple hundred that will remain, but about 900 that construction has consumed. Relate that to the available off-street public parking spaces, which is about 20,000 along University Avenue. And seldom have I ever seen those 20,000 off-street spaces fully filled. To your second point, Representative Biskins, on the demand for the parking grants, the city awarded 24 parking grants, and I'm recalling, Ms. Kaufman, that the demand for those was around 3 dozen or so. You were closer to that than I was.
It's around, that sounds about right.
35 to 40 was the request for those parking grants, and 24 were able to be fulfilled with the $1.25 million available.
It's about two-thirds.
Approximately.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Go ahead, Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In addition to the billboards, the marketing company is also doing some inserts. This is an insert that was put in some local papers, such as City Pages. They've also had ads in MSP magazine and promoted some events. They had State Fair fans. We had State Fair fans at the State Fair booth last year, and they also handed out fans and did an event at the Gophers' first game. And then they've also created a restaurant guide, in fact, noting the time of day, and that if people are interested in a lunch activity afterwards, I've brought a copy of the restaurant guide that's been produced, so you can support the local businesses. And then they also hold a Go Green Line Fridays where they promote a local business. So today's business is Big Daddy's Barbecue, about a mile west of here on University Avenue. So I'll leave copies of those for anyone that would like to participate. Another activity that was created was this $4 million small business loan program. This is $2.5 million from the Metropolitan Council, $1 million from the City of St. Paul, and $500,000 from the Central Quarter Funders Collaborative. The criteria that was set up was based on feedback from the businesses themselves. The City of St. Paul actually oversees this program and sought input from the businesses as to the criteria, the focus of the businesses, and then the application process. So the following criteria was developed: maximum amount of $20,000 for businesses. There isn't any restrictions on what the money could be used for. It could be used for rent, could be used for staff salaries, or even for utilities. Basically, the businesses have to demonstrate a revenue loss since construction started, and one of the features of this program is that 1/5 of the loan is forgiven each year that a business stays on the corridor. So not only is it a construction mitigation, but it's a business retention program as well. So far, 130 businesses have received loans totaling $2 million. So there's about half the program still available to small businesses, and we do anticipate seeing more applications later this year. Businesses usually wait to apply towards the end of the year so they can maximize their amount. One of the other things we do on a monthly basis is we do track businesses. So I have outreach staff that walk the corridor, and they also survey the property managers for tenant changes. And you can see here that since we started tracking the businesses in March of 2011, we've had 82 businesses open, 69 have closed, 21 have actually moved within the corridor. So some businesses have made the decision, whether their lease was up or decided they needed a different space, so they've actually decided to stay in the corridor, which I think is telling that they anticipate the benefits of the light rail, and then 12 have moved off the corridor.
Ms. Coffin, on the loan stipulations, asking them to remain and have the 5-year forgiveness, did they have to stay in the exact location they were at the time construction started, or could they move down the corridor somewhere else and still have that forgivable loan? Excuse me.
I do not remind.
Madam Chair, my recollection is that stipulation would allow for the forgiveness as long as the business remains with that University Avenue presence. So those 21 that were at Dale Street that may have moved over to Lexington but still have that business presence on the avenue, that is considered remaining operational, viable along the corridor.
All right, thank you.
And then I thought I'd just end with a recent event. I may have seen it in the newspapers or the media. One of the local businesses noted all of the work that the construction workers were doing, especially in the heat of the summer, and just wanted to recognize them. So on her own, she put together an event called Hot Dogs for Hard Hats, and she worked with U7, which is a group that works with small businesses, to put together this event, and basically provided 1,000 hot dogs, brats, chips, and beans for the workers. They asked us to promote it, and there's some great quotes that she just really appreciates the business, or that the work that the workers are doing and how they had worked with her. This is just one example. There's a lot of other little stories that don't make the press about businesses that, on hot days make their space available. I know Dunn Brothers on hot days has made their space available and said, please come in, tell the workers to come in, they can get a free glass of water. Best Steakhouse was another location that, said, feel free to have them come in, they can sit in the air conditioning, enjoy the air conditioning, get some water, again, on those hot days. So you don't make the paper as much, but there is a lot of collaboration and coordination that goes on between the businesses and the workers.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Hoffman. Excuse me. Senator Lilly.
Madam Chair, Mr. Furman, we see the chart on the businesses opening and closing. Did we also track number of employees on the corridor prior to and during construction? What impact has the construction had on the number of employees working at businesses on the corridor?
Madam Chair and Senator Lilly, we have not done a monthly census of the number of employees actively engaged, actively employed on the corridor. That would require us to have access to the payrolls for those over 1,000 businesses. Some would have been willing, based on our conversations, to share that. Many were not willing to share that. So we thought a good barometer of the vitality and activity along the avenue was just to do the census of the businesses open, closed, moving along the corridor.
Mr. Furman, we also heard testimony in our last meeting about the staging of rail in front of businesses, the placement of chain link fence in front of businesses, blocking access to those businesses. And we heard that construction took month after month versus week after week that they were told was going to be there, making it very difficult for those businesses to plan for their operations. We've heard today that we worked on our communications. We worked very hard on that. But the net result was that these businesses were struggling immensely. What was done with the rails? How did that mistake happen? How are we putting the chain link fences in locations that blocked access to these businesses?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Senator Lilly, to clarify your line of questioning from what we heard at the last meeting, yes, there was segments of the running rail that were assembled and stowed in the middle of University Avenue there near Pascal through much of 2011 and then first part of 2012. That was intentionally stowed in the middle of University Avenue so not to obstruct direct access to any of those businesses on the north or south side of University Avenue. On the question of the chain link fences, what we sought, and here again it was a balance between access and safety. And our commitment to those businesses was that we would erect those fences, but always on the far, well, I'll say on the curb line of the sidewalk, so that 8, 10, or 12-foot wide sidewalk would remain open to those business front doors throughout the construction in the street. And when it came time to replace the sidewalk and do the hookup to the water to their businesses, we would strive to keep that sidewalk out of service for less than 15 days. And we believe we achieved that in most all cases up and down the avenue.
Follow-up, Senator Lilly.
Madam Chair, Mr. Furman, I am challenged by the disconnect between what we heard in the last meeting and what we're hearing today. And we were hearing from businesses how this project has impacted them, their families, their employees, the future viability of their organization. We had one testimony, a gentleman who very strongly, and it's burned in my impression, burned in my mind what he said. He said that the Met Council became the judge, the jury, and in many cases the executioner of businesses along University Avenue. I don't think you come to those types of statements unless the impact of the project truly was impacting his viability going forward. We heard great frustration with the staging, with access, with the ability of these businesses to survive. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that in some cases, this project has become a de facto effective condemnation of businesses along University Avenue. And these are people who support the project. We heard time after time from these folks that we like this project, we want it to go forward, and yet how it was implemented, how it was done, has restricted those businesses from succeeding. How do we, as legislators overseeing the Met Council, put together what we heard in testimony last time and the testimony that we're hearing today And how do we answer these residents and these business leaders from that area going forward? And lastly, what do we learn from this that we can carry forward to potential other projects?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair and Senator Lilly, I certainly understand your perspective sitting there at the legislative table, hearing the testimony from last month and this morning's testimony. And really, both stories have validity and certainly are truthful. And what Ms. Kaufman and I strived to do during that engineering period of time, 2007 through 2010, was to work with those businesses to find their thoughts, their inputs on how we could minimize that disruption. We sought to make it as clear as we could, hopefully we did, that this was going to be disruptive and dusty and difficult. But we sought to minimize that period of time in the way that we phased this project in those 1 mile segments in the westernmost 3 miles of University Avenue last year, the easternmost 3 miles of University Avenue this year. More of those small family-owned businesses are on the east end of University Avenue, so we intentionally sought to make that the second phase, not last year's first phase, so that we could make sure that the contractor was going to be efficient about their productivity, which they weren't so efficient, as I've testified this morning, last year, and to get that contract work in and out as quickly as we possibly could. But we never did say that there would be no disruption and no difficult time during that heavy construction of a couple months in front of each of those businesses. To your question about what can we learn to apply to the next project, and my next project update is Southwest, which is the next project in the queue. We believe that we can be even more proactive with those businesses through the design phase. I think where the contractor and where the project staff, my team fell a little bit short last year was being more aggressive with the contractor, with Walsh, early on. So that a lot of these missteps, and I shared some of those illustrations with you from last year, can be avoided day one rather than day 100.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the questions the public often asks about these large infrastructure projects, and I think this is perhaps the largest in recent memory, if ever, is it on time and is it on budget? And I think you mentioned clearly it seems to be on time with your 74% construction completion. Are you on budget with this project today?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Hornstein, yes and yes. We are on schedule to open up the Central Corridor Light Rail Green Line in 2014 for our federal contract. And yes, we are on budget. The overall project is $957 million for Central Corridor, and we are continuing to track well within that budget limit.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you. Well, and I also appreciated your slide of all the workers, because I think that this is really a great project to have. Good times, hard times. This is an excellent way to stimulate the economy as well as help our transportation and transit infrastructure. So hopefully the other lesson we can learn is this is a good project, and let's move forward with Southwest as well.
Well, it certainly hasn't stimulated the economy of the businesses there. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam President. And I guess this is for Mr. Furman as well. We're talking a lot about the disruption that was going on and what's going on with these small businesses. And obviously, my question is this. As we go through this process, obviously, you're hooking up water mains, you have heavy machinery rolling around, you have demolition that's happening. My question is this. Was there any damage done to the infrastructure of these businesses that was not covered by insurance of either the business owner or the contractors that they inevitably ended up paying out of pocket?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Senator Cruz, with the intensity of the construction And at the front door of these hundreds of businesses, the contractor sought to avoid any damage to their structures. The contractor did a pre-construction inventory of all those structures, including the state capitol, I should add, to assess the condition of those structures before construction ever began. That was all done back in 2010. And as construction has progressed, there have been a small number of small business claims, particularly on the east end of University Avenue, where they believe that construction has done some damage, been the cause for some damage to their buildings. So that's been reported to the contractor. We have involved our Met Council risk staff to assist in that process, but ultimately that is the responsibility of the contractor to assess whether that was caused by construction, and if so, contractor's insurance pays for it. If not, then that is assessed that that was a pre-existing condition of that structure.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Furman, do you have just a vague estimate of how many businesses we're talking about, or the potential dollar value attached to these claims?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Senator, I have a general sense of the number of claims. I do not have a sense of the dollar value of those. And when these discussions were most active during July and August, it's a dozen or two claims. Most of them minor, as I understood them, but I do not have a value of what those claims entail.
And Madam Chair, minor, not minor, what it sounds to me like is in order to keep these businesses in operation, that there is the potential some of these small businesses did have to pay up front out of pocket a certain amount, even if they may be able to recoup that down the road, just to keep their businesses going in the short term. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Senator Cruz.
Mr. Furman.
Each business managed through construction in their own way. So how they were capitalized, I did not have access to that information on whether they had to pay out before construction, during construction. But I would imagine that some of those businesses would have to have out-of-pocket expenses as they went through construction.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Biskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Furman, good to hear your emphatic answer to Representative Hornstein that you are both on time and on budget. That's appreciated. Of the $957 million, how much was set aside in the contingency fund?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, $155 million.
Representative Biskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And what is the status of the contingency fund at this time, Mr. Furman?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, we have committed to date $88 million of that fund.
Representative Biskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Final question, Mr. Furman. Is support for the local businesses that experienced hardships due to the construction an acceptable use of the contingency fund?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, no, it is not. I've explored that, and due to statutory limitations, the council cannot provide any direct assistance to any of those small or big businesses.
Representative Biskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I hope the members of the legislature sitting around this table heard that, because we've got another big project coming forth. We've heard from businesses, as Senator Lilly said, that we have a big problem here. We're looking at a project which may, at the end of the day, be left with upwards of $20 to $30 million yet in its pocket when all is said and done. All right? And yet we can't, because of statutory restrictions, help these businesses with that money sitting around, and I think that's a shame. So I hope you take that into consideration when you all come back next year. And I'm in Guayaquil, Ecuador, enjoying the sun.
Mr. Furman, something rang in my head from a past news article that I read regarding the Business Resource Collaborative. And are you familiar with that entity, Mr. Furman?
Madam Chair, Ms. Kaufman has worked with them very closely for the last 5 years.
Okay.
I'd like her to respond, please.
All right, wonderful. Ms. Kaufman, tell me about your connections and your collaborative work with this entity, and I understand they still have some funds available, and are you looking at partnering with them to give some more business relief?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do work very closely with the Business Resources Collaborative. That is a group we actually started back in 2008 or so, meeting on Fridays. It was just a informal meeting that we called the First Friday Group, where we met with businesses at the project office, in business chambers, business organizations, and some of the business advocacy groups. And out of that, we ended up receiving some funding from the Central Corridor Funders Collaborative to do some strategic planning and identify some priorities as far as what businesses needed. Result of that effort was in 2010, the release of the Ready for Rails program. That was a packet of information that was put together with all the information as far as different support organizations, grant programs, loan programs, business resources, as well as all the outreach staff, contact information. That was also made available online, kind of a one-stop shop at readyforrail.net, and also a printed packet that was also translated into 4 languages and then distributed to all the businesses on University Avenue so they could show how they could prepare. They continue to get funding. The Discover Central Corridor marketing program was led by the Business Resources Collaborative, and they've also done some other activities as well, again with funding from the Central Corridor Funders Collaborative.
So how much of their dollars from the Business Resources Collaborative has been given out to businesses in the form of grants or loans, or has that happened?
Madam Chair, I don't think they've actually given direct grants to the businesses. Rather, it's been grants to the different organizations like University 7 or UABA or University Avenue Business Association or the Asian Economic Development Association, basically grant dollars for them to bring in a speaker or hire staff to provide financial assistance or marketing assistance to the businesses. So basically to provide a free resource to the businesses.
So they're not really there to give out grants or loans to help businesses like the $20,000 grants or loans that they're not in that business, is what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any further questions for these 2 testifiers? Before you leave, Mr. Furman, I just am curious, if you were to give yourself an overall grade on this project to date, what grade would you give yourselves, the Met Council?
Well, Madam Chair, that's a timely question because before I came to the hearing today, I was with both of my grade school teachers and parent-teacher conferences, and we talked about that. And so I'd say that the project has improved its performance greatly over 2011. And so here at this point in time, through almost the end of 2012, I'd say we're at a solid B+, and striving to then accomplish and deliver on time and on budget, striving for that A grade in 2014.
Okay. And are you going to be allowing the businesses in the community to give you a grade when this project is over, or is there any mechanism set up for them to grade you?
Well, because of the engagement we've had with the businesses and the Business Resources Council and the community-level groups that we have seated over time, we will certainly be doing kind of a post-project reflection, lessons learned. I've been at these New Start projects for over a quarter century, and we find that to be useful because there's always the next project, and we can apply those lessons for the next one.
All right. So I guess you don't get up. You go on to Southwest Corridor, right?
One more project,
All right.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I'll make this quick. I know we're consuming a lot of your valuable time, but just wanted to give a quick update on Southwest. Here's the project description showing the scope and the budget. 15 miles of new Green Line light rail from downtown Minneapolis, Target Field, out to Eden Prairie, going through 5 cities, essentially Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, Hopkins, Minnetonka, and Eden Prairie. We'll have 17 new stations along that line. It's forecasted to cost here in the early engineering stages of $1.25 billion. About 30,000 rides per weekday, which is comparable to what we have today on Hiawatha, and operating cost of $33 million when we are expected to start operations. Here's a general waterfall chart that shows the engineering work that we're in the midst of here, which will lead to final design. That reference to ROD is an engineering and environmental term that the feds use. It's the record of decision when we would complete the environmental review process for this project as required by federal environmental regs. And then construction begins, maybe a little bit of advanced utility reconstruction there in 2014, but the heavy lifting begins upon receipt of the full funding grant agreement. That's the FSGA reference, and that is when the federal government makes its commitment to participate in the funding of this project. And then delivery of the project 15, 16, 17, opening in 2018. Where we're at right now, today is a very big milestone date for Southwest LRT. A couple hours ago, the Federal Register published the availability of our draft environmental impact statement. It's been in the works for a long time, been led by our project partner, Hennepin County, and this publication today begins a 60-day formal public comment period where citizens, businesses, public agencies may comment on the project. That'll help inform our preliminary engineering work and ultimately result in a final environmental impact statement that we'll publish in less than 2 years. We're doing some other important procurements here. I'll just highlight one of them, and that is we have invited proposals for a pair of engineering contracts for the west half of the project, another for the east half of the project, and those proposals were received a week and a half ago, and we have begun evaluation of those with a Met Council award scheduled for late this year or first of 2013.
Excuse me one second, Representative Biskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can wait till after.
Okay, sure. All right, go ahead, Mr. Furman.
Okay, thanks. And so there we are in the preliminary engineering status that I just spoke to, with the Met Council award scheduled for a couple months out. And then you may have seen in your news clips just a week ago where the White House and U.S. Department of Transportation identified the Southwest project as a project of national and regional significance. And what that translates to is that the feds want to do a better job streamlining these projects to get them in the ground quicker, to make these important infrastructure investments. And so with this designation as a national significant project, the feds will expedite and better coordinate than they have in the past the environmental process. So that's the environmental impact statement, and then ultimately the federal permitting. The Environmental Protection Agency has to grant a permit for this project, the Army Corps of Engineers, and some other federal agencies. So it's trying to better coordinate, integrate, and align the federal review process to get these projects in the ground more quickly.
Does Congress have any say in this? I mean, you mentioned the EPA and all that, but does Congress, don't they have the purse strings to allocate these funds?
Madam Chair, this action last week is from the executive branch to better align and coordinate executive branch departments in the review of these projects. You are also correct that ultimately it will be the Congress who will be the financial participant for these big New Star projects. And I think I've got the pie chart here that quantifies that for you. Just like in the past projects here in the region, Hiawatha, North Star, and Central, we will be seeking 1/2 financial participation from the feds. Shown here is that $625 million. And then the local breakdown is 3 ways. It is the 30% from the county's transit improvement board, 10% from our host county, Hennepin County Regional Railroad Authority, and then 10% as past practice from state bonds. And our status of funding to date for the engineering work, you can see summarized here, not quite $50 million, and that includes the recent action on the part of the Commissioner Phillips and the deed grant award for $2 million a couple weeks ago. And that's the quick summary of where we are at on Southwest LRT.
All right, Representative Biskins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Furman, one of the things that people who have been, who have poo-pooed, how's that, Representative? The rail transit all along has been the issue of projected ridership. In light of the North Star debacle and the projected ridership there, and now we lower the price to try and encourage more, and it's actually losing as we do that. How do you justify a projected ridership rate on this line that is comparable to Hiawatha, when Hiawatha has the Mall of America, the Metrodome, and the airport, two of them in particular, high destination areas which simply do not exist on this line? How do you justify a projected ridership comparable to the Hiawatha?
Mr. Furman?
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, the ridership forecasting for the Southwest line is for the Green Line, and the reason I mention that is because that's important in that with now the introduction of Central Corridor as a new light rail line, that's the Green Line from downtown Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul. Southwest line will be simply an extension of that Green Line. So that person who's getting on the train in Eden Prairie may go to their job in downtown Minneapolis or a Twins game at Target Field, or to class at the University of Minnesota, or to come to the state capitol to attend a legislative hearing. That's one ticket, one ride, one train for that person to do that. If that person from Minnetonka has to go down the airport to catch a plane to go to a business meeting today in Chicago, they simply take the train to downtown Minneapolis, transfer to the Hiawatha line, and in about 24 minutes they're at the airport. So we have certainly the benefit of now two lines, the Hiawatha and the Central Green Line, and that will allow more access, greater mobility, and the 30,000 rides per weekday that we forecast.
Representative
Well,
Biskins?
thank you, Madam Chair. So a little confused there. So will the numbers be then clumped together, or will the Met Council continue to look at these separate lines and ridership on the separate lines? In other words, are we saying that because this line connects with Hiawatha, that we're just going to say, well, if you get on the Hiawatha line and it connects with this new proposed line, then that counts as a rider on the new proposed line too? Or are you going to keep these separate, and if so, how are you going to do that?
Mr. Furman?
Madam Chair, Representative Biskins, that's a good question, and our federal partner, the Federal Transit Administration, really looks to isolate and quantify those rides by each new project. So we will continue to report the ridership on the Hiawatha line, and when the Central Corridor opens, we'll report the ridership on that Green Line. As we add the Southwest line, that will simply be an extension of the Green Line, and so our ridership reporting prior to Southwest will say, 35,000, 40,000 per weekday on Central, and then we will add to that, we forecast this 30,000 to that Central Corridor total. So there will be an easy way to quantify and to assign those ridership numbers as we open up each of these individual projects.
Representative Biskins?
So thank you. Mr. Furman, then as I understand it, a justification for the 30,000 projected rides is because the Metropolitan Council is assuming, since this connects with Hiawatha, that these people on this end of the Twin Cities will get on there, and we can use those who would be traveling to the Mall of America. Am I making any sense? And maybe you should. I mean, if it's new rides, it's new rides. I'm not trying to be tricky here. I just wanted the justification for the line when you don't have the major draws that you do on the Hiawatha.
Madam Chair and Representative Biskins, all good questions. Trying to understand the ridership forecast is very critical. And these are the very same questions that I respond to from the Federal Transit Administration. They want to invest their federal dollars in these projects that are going to have the highest benefit for riders. So every time a person gets on at Southwest Station or Shady Oak Station in Hopkins or Beltline Road Station in St. Louis Park, that will count as one ride. And the way our ridership model has generated that is based on where those people live and where those people are going. So some of those people get on at those Southwest stations. They may be going downtown, so a large propensity of them will be going downtown. Some are going to be going to the university or over to St. Paul, and some are going to be going to the Mall of America. What we want to quantify is the number of those new rides who are getting on at those new Southwest stations, and that equates to that 30,000.
Excuse me, I did it again. Senator Lilly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Furman, so as I'm looking at the chart on the funding status, approximately $50 million, $49 million has been allocated or dedicated to the project thus far. How much of that has been spent?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Senator Lilly, $2.5 million.
Senator Lilly.
So, Madam Chair, Mr. Furman, the remaining funds are sitting where? With the Met Council? Where these funds are allocated? Only $2.5 million have been spent. Where are the rest of those funds residing?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Senator Lilly, from our 3 local funding partners, those funds reside with those funding partners. So of the total $7 million from the state, which obviously the legislature has most interest in, the first $5 million was from a 2009 bond appropriation, and so that resides with Minnesota Management Budgets, and we request those monies as we need them. And then the recent $2 million, those will be provided to the council through a grant with deed.
Senator Lilly.
Madam Chair, Mr. Furman, could we talk about the $2 million that came through that deed? How is that money being utilized, and what leverage did you gain by that $2 million for federal monies?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Senator Lilly, the use of that $2 million, your first part of your question, will be for the engineering work that we are preparing to award those technical contracts here first of the year, and that will allow that work to be continued and funded through 2013. And then the second half of your question, I've suddenly forgotten. What was the second half of your question?
Leveraging to federal dollars.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
And so within the last 2 weeks, 2 important actions did occur on this project. It was one, the deed award a couple weeks ago, and then the White House announcement on expediting the review of this project just over a week ago. The $2 million from the state, we believe, was an important signal of partnership from the state, as well as our other local funding partners at CTIV and Hennepin County. And that's really what the feds look for. They look for those funding commitments from the local partners before the feds commit. And so while we don't have the full and complete commitments, they continually, when we meet with them every single month, they come to Minnesota. We have to provide them evidence of support and commitment from our local funding partners.
Senator Lilly.
Madam Chair, Mr. Furman, so that leads to another question that I get frequently, and that is, what is the status of the Southwest Corridor? Is it a go? Is it in planning stage? Is it in EIS? Where are we at with this, and how do we identify when this project is a go and isn't? Because when I sit on the Transportation Committee and have conversations there, and Senator Dibble, we sit together on that committee, but my understanding is that we're still waiting for certain blocks to fall into place in order to have the project be a go. That would be my understanding. But when I hear press releases, and I hear from Chair Haig, and I hear from others, I believe I hear that this project is already a foregone conclusion and is absolutely going to happen. So how would you identify the project, where it is in its stages, and at what point does it truly become a go?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Senator Lilly, these projects are large and complex and have a lengthy gestation period. So let me simplify my answer for you to say that there's really 3 steps along the way to get a full commitment and a full green light. Number 1 is for the feds to accept and approve these projects to begin preliminary engineering. That happened 13 months ago. There are over 100 projects nationally that were seeking that status. There are 11 projects in America today that have this preliminary engineering status. Southwest LRT is one of them. Second step, is for the feds to approve these projects to go into what's called final design. That's a federal term. And that is to essentially finalize the design details, assemble the construction bid packages, and prepare the competitive bidding process. That step is not yet to be approved and is not yet scheduled to be approved until a little over 2 years from now, end of 2014, early 2015. Third and final step is for the feds then to sign off and execute the full funding grant agreement. And that we expect right now to be sometime 2015.
Senator Lilly.
Madam Chair, Mr. Furman, so if I understand correctly from those 3 stages, the first stage has been completed. The second stage, the final design, would be sometime in 2014, correct?
A couple years out.
A couple years out. So at this point, the project could, again, I'm looking for a term. Where are we at? Would we consider this to be a preliminary discussion still at this point, or is from a Met Council perspective, I'm looking for a definition of where we feel we are today, a snapshot in time with this project. In other words, are we calling this project a foregone conclusion, or where, how do we identify where we are at today?
Mr. Furman.
From a global perspective, Madam Chair, Senator Lilly, I will say that FTA will only grant approval for these projects to move into that preliminary engineering stage of those projects they believe will be successful and have merit and will ultimately be a wise and productive investment of federal dollars. I will speak from my personal experience. Southwest LRT is my 8th project of this kind that I have worked on over the last decades. And each of those projects, as they were approved into preliminary engineering, proceeded to final design, proceeded to the full funding grant, made it through all 3 of those steps successfully. I will add that the feds, before they will grant us approval to begin that final design in a couple of years, they will be looking to the Met Council to have all those local funding commitments from our 3 local funding partners in place, from the County's Transit Improvement Board, from Hennepin County, and from the state.
Representative Olberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have a couple questions kind of along this line. I've asked a couple times publicly whether or not CTIB could fund the 10% state match, and have been told privately, probably. I don't know that I've ever got a clear, concise answer publicly. What I'm interested in is, given, first of all, in your numbers, when you talk about your operating costs, is that the subsidy number or is that total cost? In other words, what's the cost to the state going to be beyond farebox?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, the number you see on the slide, the 33 million estimated operating costs, that is a full year of operation. Don't know and haven't circled a date in 2018, but the first full year we estimate to be about 33 million, and about 22 million of that would be subsidies. About a third, conservatively, we're about 40% today, fare box recovery on Hiawatha, but if we assume a third initially, that leaves $22 million of operating subsidy in that first full year to be split between the state and the invest.
All right, so my concern is we saw in the case of North Star, there actually was legislation to exempt the North Star from the cost-benefit index or standard in order to get the federal dollars. There's, they changed some of the standards in the middle of the game. We can argue about, why that was done and where we are now, with the vitality of the line. But I'm more concerned moving forward, if the CTIB, if there wasn't money at the state to cover the 125 and CTIB and Hennepin County decided we really want to do this, and because we're taking in almost $100 million a year off of that 5-county transit tax, we've got money to do this, so CTIBs and or other local partners step up and say we're going to cover the $125 million state share. Could we find ourselves in a position where the capital costs are fully funded and approved by the feds, and then the state is left in the position of funding the operating subsidy without having put any commitment towards the capital cost?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, that's really a two-part question, so let me take the capital piece and the operating piece. On the capital side, that's a hypothetical scenario, and really I'm in no position to respond on behalf of County's Transit Improvement Board. That's really a policy question for they and for Hennepin County, should they choose to consider and act to take on some of that or all of that 10% of the state responsibility. So that's a policy discussion for you all to have.
But if I might, you just told us that you've worked on 8 of these projects over decades. I'm talking about, is there a provision in the federal funding that says that money actually has to come from the state of Minnesota, or is the federal funding provision you just need a 50% match coming out of the local jurisdiction and we really don't care where you get it?
Mr. Furman.
Madam Chair, Representative Holberg, the latter. The feds don't care about what color of local money. The feds want to see the 50% local commitment.
Right. So I think we hit the first hurdle, that's been shared with me privately, and now we're going to talk about it a little bit publicly here, that we could conceivably be in a position where, through no action on a state level, all of the local costs of the capital investment could be put in place, and we could get federal approval for funding, and then have no plan other than the state's going to pay the operating subsidy.
Madam Chair and Representative
Mr.
Holberg.
Do you want to identify yourself?
Yep, my name is Judd Shetton. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Council. I appreciate the opportunity to respond. Representative Holberg, following up on what Mr. Furman said about the 50% as far as the capital, he's correct. And then going to your question on the operating piece, there is state statute that says the state will pay 50% of the costs for the operations for any light rail line. So even in the scenario you're talking about, there's already state statute that would require the state to pay for that.
Right. And
Holberg.
Madam Chair and Mr. Shetton, and I'm very aware of that, and so I'm trying to make the point here that, as public policy makers on a state level, whether or not we provide the $125 million in capital funding for this line, we could find ourselves in a position where we will be caught with the subsidy of at least $22 million, and I guess we're looking at, I like how they do this, and when they say, nearly 30,000 rides, well, they count it each way, so the paper never reports that it's half the number of people, using this, and so I'm very concerned that we're moving in a way in which we're going to get caught with the subsidy, whether or not we choose to put up state dollars or not.
Madam Chair.
Representative Biskin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up on Representative Holberg's comments about the 30,000 rides, not only is it half the people, because it is that each ride is one way, they also rarely tell you how many of those rides are cannibalized from existing transit programs. And to get to the number of 30,000 that they're looking at, there's going to be a big hit to the suburban opt-out programs in that area.
Representative Leidiger, I believe you had a question.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and that's, I just want to follow up. She looked at it, Representative Holberg, from, the state's participation perspective. I'm curious about the local opt-out community perspective. Does any of this line go through the opt-out areas?
Mr. Furman?
Madam Chair, Representative Leidiger, yes, this line does serve a portion of the Southwest Metro service area.
And
I'm sorry, Representative Leidiger.
thank you, Madam Chair. So how does the funding mechanism work there from that local perspective in the CTED?
Mr. Furman?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Representative Leidiger, I guess I'm not quite following when you say the funding mechanism. The opt-out providers receive a certain amount of the motor vehicle sales tax every year, so I don't think that would change at all. But just so you know, we are also having those conversations. I know James Clark was here in the office there, Representative, and we are having those conversations as well. I also think it's important to explain that the type of service that Southwest Transit provides versus what the Southwest Corridor LRT line is going to provide are very different. They're, the type of service that we're talking about with LRT is station to station to station. The type of service that they're providing, much of their service is direct from their stations, one-way trip straight to downtown as well. So it's a little bit different, but we are also having those conversations right now about what type of service would be affected for them. But as far as the funding, I don't think that there is an issue there because they receive a certain percentage of the motor vehicle sales tax, and then that's distributed to the different opt-out providers through an agreement with them as well. So that shouldn't be affected.
Representative Leidiger, that answer your question?
Yes. Regarding the ridership projections, do we have an idea of what percentage of that 30,000 comes from the Southwest Transit, from the bus lines, the feeders?
Madam Chair, Representative Leidinger, I do not have that level of breakdown committed to memory on the number of bus, feeder passengers, parking ride passengers. I'd have to go back to the forecast and pull that and provide that to you if you wish.
Is this something you'd like for him to do?
Please do.
All right.
Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I find this line of inquiry curious for a couple of reasons. One is, I don't know that we're necessarily in the business of scrambling around trying to protect particular agencies for particular reasons. The other is, the experience has been with Hiawatha, and the experience has been with every other metropolitan area that when you introduce rail service, a couple of things happen. One is the efficiency of your service in terms of dollars and cents goes up fairly significantly, both on the capital and the operating side. And if you want to get into the whole subsidy discussion, the least efficient, most highly subsidized form of transit service we have in the metropolitan area here are the opt-out services. So I'm not sure what exactly path we're trying, or what point we're trying to prove by characterizing ridership on the Southwest Corridor as cannibalizing other forms of transit. The fact of the matter is that a lot of choice riders, people who have options to drive or to use transit, opt for using transit in higher numbers when they're provided different options, and options that are compatible with their life and their pattern of living, when they're offered light rail transit and commuter transit.
Well, I'm just guessing here, but because you have a transit, an opt-out in your area, you're probably wanting to speak on their behalf. That's what we do as representatives of our specific areas, is be an advocate for those entities.
Madam Chair, if I may follow up, I think what we need to do is speak on behalf of our constituents who are looking for transit, better transit, and we speak on behalf of the larger interest of public policy when we're looking for providing transportation that serves the metropolitan area. This rush to protect the opt-outs because they form this little base of power that has, in this dynamic that has cropped up in this legislature, I think has been really curious, especially from folks who are all about streamlining and efficiency and not protecting bureaucratic turf.
Representative Leidiger, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, thank you. I guess 2 points, really. First of all, I'm from Carver County. I mean, that's what we're talking about. The end of this goes right buttresses up against Carver County. We're going to be the people from there are going to be some of the major feeders into that. Second of all, and I wish I could source this, but from my study on the whole concept, the riders are going to come from people that are used to riding public transportation. So there is a major cannibalization issue here. And that's what I'm really trying to determine is, those numbers in that 30,000 ridership estimate. How many of those riders are really coming over from other public transportation providers? That's where I understand that the ridership comes from for this light rail. It is not going to be a lot of people getting out of their cars. It's going to be people that are already using some sort of private or public transportation. And that's why we need to drill down on this.
Madam Chair.
Senator Dibble.
Well, I think Representative Leidiger probably needs to read the environmental impact statement and read the studies for himself, because that's just simply not the case. There will be a lot of new riders to transit. A lot of it will be generated, of course, by the land use patterns that crop up around fixed guideway transit investments. So what we'll see is new riders to the transit system coming out of their cars, absolutely. It's not going to be cannibalizing our precious opt-outs.
I think the opt-outs might take exception with that. Representative Biskins.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Dibble, I do appreciate the fact that you are curious about that, because curiosity does elicit a desire to listen and learn. All right? I'm not here defending an opt-out. In fact, the opt-outs don't need any defense on this line, and Mr. Shetland will tell you flat out that the opt-outs are okay with this project. So we're not here defending the opt-outs. But to sit there and say that this line, that it is just not true that this line cannibalizes the opt-out line is a statement beyond belief. Met Council knows it does. The opt-outs know it does, and they're okay. All right? If it's different, if it's a choice, they're fine. All right? We're trying to drill down on the ridership numbers, not who's the winner or the loser, the ridership numbers. And if the ridership numbers are simply shifting people from one form of transit to another form, then we need to know that. We're curious about it. We're willing to learn.
Madam Chair.
Senator Dibble.
Representative Leidiger said people are not going to be coming out of their cars and riding LRT. That's what he said. And that's what I disagree with.
Okay. Well, you're on record as such.
Madam Chair, we do have some Hiawatha real data that I do have that I can share with the committee, just what actual experience has been. And 70% of those people who do ride Hiawatha LRT today are choice riders. They have a car in the driveway that they leave at home.
All right. Thank you. Representative Holberg, and then we're going to wrap things up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'll be very brief. And Senator Dibble, I think you grew up in Apple Valley, so you might have just a little soft spot in your heart for the opt-out areas. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm not from an opt-out. I'm the weird little town that...
We traded places, didn't we?
The weird little town that didn't want to be part of an opt-out and is so sitting out there as a Metro Transit community. I think probably the only one totally segmented from the rest of the Metro Transit service area by opt-out communities. But Senator Dibble, I think you have to make the case, you said the opt-outs were the least efficient, I think was the term that you used, and certainly it's if you talk about subsidy per ride, you are correct. If you talk about subsidy per passenger mile, you're not. And in fact, unless something's changed dramatically, the route that has the least amount of subsidy on it is the commuter route out of Lakeville, with over 70% fare box recovery for the cost of the running of that. So I think that we have to be careful. I think everybody at this table can agree we have the most unexplainable, disjointed transit governance, funding. It's a puzzle with pieces that aren't even the same size, let alone fit together. They're different scale, and so I think we're never going to solve that in the next 2 minutes. But I did have to at least come to the defense of the commuter routes. They have very high fare box recovery, some of the least subsidized routes in the system, and that it's, we can't totally generalize the condition of their service.
Well, Madam Chair, I'll just say I agree with Representative Holberg. Having lived in Apple Valley before there was any transit service of any sort, very sympathetic to being stranded out in the suburbs if you're not able to drive a car for whatever reason. Absolutely. And I think the issue we share in common is how we address folks' mobility in the best possible fashion.
Right. Well, you get the last word, and thank you, Met Council. We went over again. There's just so much to discuss, and so the Met Council folks, Ms. Bogie has agreed to come back another day, and we will talk about the budget and the tax levy.
And Madam
Mr. Shetland, do you have some comments?
Well, all I was going to say is, Madam Chair, I think you had raised the question yesterday about having the transit police come, and we'd be happy to provide information at the next meeting as well.
All right.
So that'd be something that we can
Sounds
do
great.
for you.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
Meeting's adjourned.